So good evening and welcome to the Voices to Votes speaker series. My name is Heather Reed and I'll be your MC for the evening. I'm the Community Economic Development Consultant with the Haliburton County Development Corporation. And I'd like to begin tonight with a land acknowledgement. I respectfully acknowledge that I live and work on the traditional territory of the Michi-Sagig and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the William Treaties First Nations, and also within the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin First Nations. And I live in Algonquin Highlands, so it's a bit of a drive to get here to Wilberforce today. And as I was driving, I was really appreciating the landscape and the land and how much space we have here. And you know, when I think about this evening and the why we do things, and for me, the land is a very big part of why I'm here and why I continue to make my home here. And I also, at the same time, was reflecting on September 30th and Truth and Reconciliation Day and the process of truth and reconciliation and wondering why. So I want to acknowledge this evening the profound impact the land has on our lives and the profound opportunity we have to move towards truth and reconciliation as a nation, as a community, and as individuals. So tonight is the second of a 4-part series, and this evening's focus is on finding your way and thinking about the bigger picture in terms of why one might get more involved in local government. How informed and engaged do you want to be, and whether as a candidate or as a supporter or as someone to run for office, as a voter, as a concerned citizen? What role do you want to play and why? This series as a whole is supported by the Haliburton County Development Corporation, Canoe FM, the Haliburton County Community Cooperative through the Telling Our Stories speaker series, and Gen Design, who built the fantastic website. I also wanted to give a shout out to our technical team, Midori, who is doing the recording for us, Eric doing sound, and Tammy for the tech support with the presentation. Thank you very much. So this series is a brainchild of the Haliburton Highlands Healthy Democracy Project, which is part of the co-op. And the Healthy Democracy Project is a community-led initiative aiming to strengthen civic participation, support local leadership, and support the democracy in Haliburton County. Important to note, this project is about looking to the future to ensure the strong local tradition of effective municipal council and democratic participation in our community, and that continues. I'd like to take a moment to introduce the team behind the scenes. If you can just stand or make yourself known. Barry Martin, we have at the back at registration. Carol Moffett. Sean Pennylegion. And Jessica Slade and Lauren Hunter weren't able to join us tonight, but they are incredible parts of the committee as well. This is really a dedicated group of our locals who believe in the community connection and inviting people to see where their place is in making our democracy work. And thank you very much for making tonight possible and the whole series. Our agenda for this evening is pretty simple. I'm going to give you a bit of a recap from the first session. And then most of our time will be spent in the comfy chairs with our panelists. And at the end, I'll come back up and just give you a preview of what's coming next. So we had a fantastic turnout at the Legion in Haliburton with over 90 people in attendance. And our growing email list, if you haven't joined it yet, please see Barry or Pat at the back. Jessica Slade gave a really interesting presentation about how local government works. And we also included success stories from each municipality to highlight how government and community work together. And that's where the real magic happens. To quote Jessica, every success story we shared has at its heart citizens with ideas, councils with authority, staff with expertise, and volunteers with time and energy. And that's the recipe. It's not one or the other. It's the combination of community and council collaborating together that can really make things happen. If you're interested in watching that, it is available on the website for the project, which is hhdp.ca. During the first session, we also had lots of participation in our live polling. And so I just wanted to show you some of those results, and then we'll get you to try adding your own voice to those as well. So this was a question about what would make running for office more feasible for folks. And interesting just to note that mentorship, information, removing some of the financial barriers were some of the top reasons that people wanted or were looking for support to get involved. So maybe we'll just go to the next one and see how this group compares. So you can go back onto that site where you were before and see what you think. Or we can all see what we think. Let's give it a little bit more time. We've got about half of the respondents in. So that's interesting. It's pretty consistent with our group from the last night. So that's great. Thank you for putting in your information. Let's see what the next slide is. So actually this was an interesting one too, and it'll be interesting to gauge for tonight how many folks had considered running. So 17, I think, was a bit of a surprise actually, that 17% had considered, and 25 were maybe. So some interest in the crowd, which is really nice to see. And do we have this one as a live question? Okay. So let's give this one a try as well. I feel like I should be commentating like a race, a horse race. Okay, great. Well, thank you. That's we're seeing a rise in the yes, so we're up 3%. That's great. So that's just a little bit of a flavor of some of the types of questions that we looked at the last session, and but we want to get into tonight's session because that's what we're really here about. We have two former politicians with us. They are here to share their thoughts with you about why they ran for office and why perhaps you should consider getting involved. In a moment, I will invite the speakers to join me at the front. They have prepared a short introduction, and then we have some questions to get things started, and we'll open the floor to you as well. I do want to note that the committee specifically chose to invite Barry and Maryam because they're no longer in office. And this was a deliberate choice to keep the conversation focused on that big picture, on that why one might get involved, rather than a discussion about current community issues or concerns. So as you listen to the opening remarks and questions, and as you're formulating your own questions in your mind, just keep that context in mind. So I will introduce our two panelists, Barry Devolin. Barry is a former member of Parliament for our riding, Haliburton-Kawartha Lakes-Brock. He was our MP for 11 years and acted as Assistant Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons for 7 years. Barry has many political roles, but comes at politics from a teacher's lens, seeking to help people better understand politics in general. And our second panelist, Maryam, joins us from Peterborough-Kawartha riding, where she was the Member of Parliament for 6 years. She also served in a number of roles in government as cabinet minister and now operates a business that helps to empower individual and organizations to lead change in their community. So please join me in welcoming both of them to the front. Oh, there we go. Wow. I got loud fast. So I'm going to give each of the panelists some time to introduce themselves further and give some opening remarks. And we will be passing the mic back and forth, so just bear with us as we're figuring out the system. So Barry.
Thanks, Heather, and thanks everyone for attending tonight. My name is Barry Devolin, and I'm from the Haliburton area. More specifically, I have a lot of family roots on this side of Haliburton County. I tell people that my mother was born in Cardiff, my grandmother was born in Cheddar, my great-grandfather and his 3 wives are all buried down the road at Wilbermere. That's another story. Consecutively, not concurrently, okay? I was the MP here for 11 years, and I retired in 2015 and have left the political world entirely. I often tell people I'm a recovering politician, and my recovery is almost complete, or is complete. But I'm happy to be here tonight. I don't know why I was always interested in politics. You know this yourself. You have personal interests. You have friends that like opera, right? And you think, why on earth does anybody like opera, right? When you like country music. Apparently there are some baseball fans out there tonight watching baseball, you know. So I had an interest in politics, and I don't remember consciously deciding what level of politics, because I guess we can talk about local politics at the municipal level versus provincial, versus national, federal, or even international kind of global issues. When I was 16, I was a Rotary Exchange student and lived in the Netherlands for a year. And that was a big change coming from Haliburton when you're 16 years old. And I decided I wanted to be a part of the world. I actually wanted to be a diplomat when I went off to university, but got interested in politics provincially and federally. I was never a member of the association at the university I went to. I wasn't interested at that level. More, I don't want to say philosophical, but I was always more attracted to the ideas and studied politics and government. And as far back as 1987, I was a campaign manager in this riding for a provincial candidate. So that's a long time ago. And I've been a campaign manager federally and provincially. I've been chief of staff to different cabinet ministers. I was the director of research for a federal party at one time, as well as being a member of parliament. And I worked as a consultant related to that field for a few years back in the late 90s. So my first point is that I don't know why I'm interested in it. I'm just interested in it. My interest tends to be more at the international, national level rather than the municipal level. And again, I'm not sure why that is, but I can tell you that over the years, I know lots of people in municipal politics, and I know lots of them are in this room today. My brother was a municipal politician for many years. My grandmother was the deputy reeve in Faraday Township for many years, just on the other side of the line. And one distinction that I would make, if anyone's interested in getting into politics, I would make a distinction between municipal versus federal and provincial. And the biggest difference is that federal and provincial are a party system. It's a team sport. And you're part of a team, and that means sometimes you get to say what you think, and other times you have to bite your tongue. And if you've ever played on a team, whether it's in a business or whether it's in a sport, you know that sometimes if you're the right tackle and the quarterback says, here's what we're going to do, you don't argue, you just try to do it, right? And it's the same in federal and provincial politics. Municipal politics in Ontario is not a party sport, right? We don't think in terms of our mayors and councillors as Liberals, Conservatives, NDP. There are places in Canada where it is. In BC, municipal politics is a partisan activity. It's not in Ontario. And so people at the municipal level are involved as individuals, and they kind of pursue their own interests. They can say whatever they want, whenever they want. So somebody once said, if you're running a rodeo, you need horses, and you need some horses to be in the chuck wagon team that'll work 8 together, and you need bucking broncos. But what doesn't work is putting a bucking bronco in one of the chuck wagon teams, right? So if you're a bucking bronco, municipal politics might be your thing, right? Because you can speak freely at any time. You don't have to kind of toe the line for a party. Whereas if you're going to run federally, provincially, you have to make that shift. And I'll tell you that over the years, I saw many former municipal politics who ran provincially or federally, and many of them had a really hard time. They had a really hard time doing it because they were used to being able to say what they think and not thinking in kind of partisan terms, but being able to think exactly what they thought, right? So you just need to know yourself. So we're here tonight talking about encouraging people to run. I would encourage you to get involved, and the first thing I would say is that you need to know yourself a little bit, and if getting involved in municipal politics to make our communities better is something that appeals to you, then I would encourage you to do that. Thanks.
Thanks, Heather, and thank you for that lovely land acknowledgement. We drove around, and for those of you who are from Peterborough and you've made the move here or refuse to go anywhere else, it is stunning out there, especially this time of year. So totally appreciate the connection you made in your land acknowledgement to the appreciation of this place that you call home. It's an honor for me to be back. Thank you so much for calling me back and telling me to come back and try and do a little bit of my part for this big thing that you're all trying to do here in the area. I will tell you that democracy is contagious. The more people are engaged, the more people will become engaged. When we started telling people in Peterborough that you folks are doing this, people in Peterborough started thinking about, well, we can do that too. So just by the act of coming together as a community and connecting and getting more information and trying to mobilize and inspire a new wave of politicians and perhaps even better support for those who do stick their necks out, you've already succeeded because you're inspiring others to take care of their democratic responsibilities in their own backyards. I thank you for that. And Lauren Hunter is amazing. So please take very, very good care of her, because every day I'm trying to convince her to come to Peterborough. So just say, and I can be persuasive, but she loves this place and she loves you. And I just, that you attract people like Lauren to your community speaks a lot to how civically engaged and democratically minded you all are. Thank you to the Healthy Democracy team, and for the very nice note you sent me after my last presentation with you. It was so sweet that I posted it on my office wall. I look at it often, so thank you very much for that. I realized that I'm not from here. I don't have ancestors buried in your backyard here. So just by way of channeling my inner Oprah and getting to know who's in the room, because that's the '1 rule of public speaking. How many of you are current representatives right now? Could you raise your hand? Maybe stand up and be recognized. Are you like, no? Just raise your hand so that people know you're here. Okay. How many of you are former representatives? Could you raise your hands and maybe take a look around, folks? How many of you are aspiring representatives thinking about running? Okay, there's one person here. Raise it up high. Okay. And is there somebody back there? No, he's just smiling. Okay, it's an honor to be in the room, particularly with those of you who've served your community in the past. I wish there were more opportunities for all of us to come together and learn, because there is no playbook for how to do politics. The times change, so even if there were a playbook, that playbook wouldn't always be up to date. Social media alone has changed the landscape and the reality and the pressures and the expectations of the job. So, I hope one of the things that you keep doing here locally is maintaining these connections you've built, because that institutional wisdom, here's how things get done, here's how things don't get done, is, as that mentee post showed, that's one of the things that people need to know before they jump in. And I wish I had known more about how politics worked and how it didn't, and how things got done and how they didn't before I got elected. I run a business now, and part of what I do with Onward is share what I learned the hard way with those who are leading or thinking about stepping into executive roles. We spend a lot of time and energy, and we're so fortunate to live in a democracy, to live in a country where women can put their name on a ballot, anybody can put their name on a ballot. We spend a lot of time saying, you should run, and we encourage people to run. But then they run, and they stop being people somehow. They become entities separate from the humanity, which is the reality. They become products. They become something outside of us. And no one's ever going to be happy with them no matter what they do. There will always be at least like a third of the population who will be cranky with them. And the most painful comments can sometimes come from the very same people who encourage you to run in the first place. And it's different for women than it is for men. It's different for young people than it is for more seasoned people. It's different for racialized people than it is for established people who, don't have as many intersectionalities. It's different for somebody who has a disability versus someone who doesn't. It's different for someone who's lived in the same community all their lives than someone who's, come from away. And Barry and I could be in question period, or we could be in the chamber at council, and I could say the exact same thing that Barry says, the exact same thing. But coming out of my mouth, it's going to be perceived differently than coming out of his mouth. And so I wish that the same effort we put into encouraging people to run, we put into helping keep them there, preparing them. And so part of what I do with my business is eyes wide open. There's going to be a lot of haters, and there's going to be a lot of lovely humans. It's going to be worth it. And P.S., I would highly recommend it. It is the hardest job you'll ever do. It'll become consuming, especially if you're in municipal politics, but I highly recommend it. It's the hardest job. Sometimes it's the worst job ever, but it's also the best job ever. I ran partly because of insanity. I was really young. I don't know what I was thinking. Seriously, I ran in my community originally for municipal office, actually. I ran to be mayor of Peterborough, not because I was like, I'm ready to be mayor of Peterborough. I was an activist. I was working at Fleming. I was 29. I ran because nobody else wanted to run against the incumbent. And I, along with a committee kind of like the one you've established to bring this together, worked really hard to convince people to run, and nobody wanted the job. And it dawned on me probably 10 weeks before the election. I'm like, I guess it's me. And I originally ran as a nuisance candidate, thinking I was going to make sure that the incumbent didn't run unopposed because of his policies did not align with the realities of people that I knew. But then I was given the advice to run as a credible candidate, run a credible campaign. Don't take this as a joke. How many women, how many people like you ever in the world could have an opportunity like this? So take it seriously. And I'm really glad I did. I ran and I cared about my community, because when we came to Peterborough with nothing, the community gave us everything. We were welcomed with open arms, even though our ancestors are far, far, far away. Even though we worshipped a different way, even though we didn't speak the language and we didn't have the same community connections, that kindness of strangers in our most vulnerable time, you don't forget something like that. So I always felt like I had a debt to pay back my community, and volunteering was part of how I was going to do that. Being engaged in politics is part of why I did that. But I ran kind of by accident. I won by a fluke. There was never a woman elected to represent Peterborough in Ottawa, ever. Not for there not being great women before me. But, you know, why I ran, and I think it's lovely that your whole thing is focused on why. If you don't have a good enough why, you're going to have a really hard time to stay grounded on the worst days. If you don't have a really solid why and that self-awareness that Barry was talking about, on the hardest of days when all sorts of noise and shouting is coming at you, you'll lose maybe a part of yourself, you'll lose heart, you'll lose your way. You may leave politics, or you'll just stop being excited about politics and democracy. And democracy is in trouble when people aren't hopeful or excited about it anymore. So that's my why.
Thank you for those opening remarks. It's amazing to hear the passion that still is coming through your voices. So appreciate you sharing those thoughts. I want to move on to another question about connection with community and community groups. And if you can speak a little bit about organizations that you were part of before, during, or after your time in office, and what that relationship was like, and what role you feel those organizations play.
Okay. Who would like to? I'll be your mic person. Do you want me to go next?
Sure.
Okay. So I was the vice president of the board of the YWCA in Peterborough. Before I decided to run, I had volunteered for that organization since I was 12. They were one of the... Thank you for that. I was the VP of the YWCA in Peterborough-Haliburton, and at the time Victoria as well. And that board was probably like the best run board that I'd been on. Well run, and I learned about governance. I'd been involved in them with their work since I was 12. They were one of the organizations that really helped my family and I when we first moved to Peterborough. And you know, throughout my time at Trent, I started a mental health advocacy group, which is still standing to this day, called Trent Active Minds, focused on peer support for students who are struggling with their mental health challenges and reducing the stigma associated with it. That helped because it showed me how to mobilize people. We had to run several campaigns to convince the student body to give a $2 levy to that organization so that they could hire a student to keep it running. And so $2 every year in perpetuity, but we lost that campaign twice. It was on our third try that we were able to land the $2 levy. And so that campaign experience was super helpful. While I was at Trent, I also established the Red Pashmina campaign. So we sold red scarves to support education efforts for women and girls in Afghanistan, where my ancestors are from. And that initiative showed me that with the right team and the right purpose, you can mobilize a community to raise money. And as you know, fundraising is a big part of the political process. Not as big, fortunately, here in Canada as places like the US, but it's still a big component. So that fundraising effort and that meeting new, very interesting people whose values align with mine, being part of the Red Pashmina campaign was really important for that. And that initiative continues to do its work in this day and age when it's really, really horrible for Afghan women and girls. And it's happening despite me. And that's something I'm really proud of, because a big reason why people want to be part of anything political is because you want to get something done that outlasts you. So it gave me a taste for that. But I will tell you the things that really got my activism, and it's a bug. Politics is a virus. It never leaves your body. Barry, I know you think you're recovered, but the very fact that you're here, you've fallen off the wagon, my friend, because here you are being smart and wise, and I'm really glad that you are. But politics is a bug. So I was able to get a grant to go to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women in 2012. That connected me with a world of activists and showed me how important it is to stay engaged, because like it matters worldwide what happens at the local grassroots level. PCVS, the high school I went to, there's some nodding in the room. I love that school. It saved my life. And when they decided to close it, I ended up being part of that effort to say, please don't close it. This community is so much better with this high school open in our downtown. And it, by the way, has negatively affected the vitality of our downtown, closing that high school. But, you know, that connected me with passionate, inspiring, creative people who found really interesting and thoughtful and respectful way to engage in the democratic process. And when we lost, it hurt. When we lost, it was personal, but like a new generation of activists were born, and we had the fortune to be connected with those who knew how to do politics and activism. So we learned from them. Another was the effort to prevent a parkway being built through Jackson Park in Peterborough. I just ended up like showing up to council meetings and being part of that effort to prevent the reduction of green space in our community needlessly. Another effort was, and this is probably like the biggest thing for me, because I never really liked politics. I still don't like politics, even though there's not a single second of our lives that is not affected by politics. The water we drink, the roads we drive on, the food we eat or don't eat, the jobs we have or don't have, the quality of the air that we breathe in or don't, what our kids learn in school or don't, the way we engage with the rest of our region, the rest of our country, the rest of the world. These are all political decisions. And I saw what politics did to my people. I saw what politics did to my family. We've had people be killed in this process of politics gone wrong. So I never really wanted to be, and I still don't like politics, except that it matters. And, the first time that I really got engaged, because it was going to affect my livelihood, was when our local council was debating and about to decide to shut down city bus service on Sundays in Peterborough. I was raised by a single mom. I didn't have a car. I lived in the West End, and I, went to the school in the North End, and in like the buses in Peterborough, I know I'm in a rural community, so that we have buses that come every 40 minutes is awesome. But I grew up on the bus. I grew up on transit. I was able to have a job since I was 12 because I had access to public transportation. And I got to work on the weekends like so many others. And I remember being on the bus and people were all riled up, and, flyers were being passed about this council meeting that was going to happen, where this decision was going to come to a vote, and we had to have our voices heard. And then literally like one bus ride at a time, a whole community of transit riders mobilized, and we showed up to council, and we went at the mic one by one, and we talked about why they can't do that, because we can't afford to pay $40 for a cab fare when we're making $50 that whole day working, and that they hadn't talked to us about it. That council experience, and that was my first time speaking at a mic, and it was so scary, and my picture was on the front page of the Peterborough Examiner, and that day I didn't leave my house because I was so scared. I thought somebody was going to hurt me for speaking against powerful people, because that's what happens in most countries around the world, including where I come from. But that decision, we won. They changed their minds, they listened to us, and so that was a positive experience. But overall, the connection to why and my experiences Heather, is after all that, I got really frustrated because people who'd never been on a bus before were making decisions about the bus schedule. People who had never, gone through the grocery store lineup, swiped their card, not knowing if it was going to be approved or not, were making decisions about poverty or poverty reduction measures. People who never had to rely on student loans were making decisions about us. So the big thing was, in all the things that I was engaged in, decision makers who had no idea what it was like to be most people were making decisions about us, and that wasn't working for me, and that wasn't okay for me as a Canadian.
Thank you. So my path to getting involved with politics is quite different than Maryam's. I kind of came through more of an academic and professional channel. So most of my experience in public life before I was elected was working kind of as my job in politics. So I had mentioned that I had done things like being a campaign manager previously, but that I had worked in the provincial government, in the federal government for other elected members. I had taught at a university level. Ironically, I've never taught Canadian government, but I've taught American government and Asian government, believe it or not. And it's certainly a less common path. When I got to Ottawa, I didn't want to be the prime minister. I wanted to be the speaker. Like, my goal was to try to make the place work better. That was, and I was in a minority, I don't want to say of one, but I was in a small minority of people that's what they were focused on. An MP said to me once when I was running for speaker, he said, "Why on earth would you want to do this? It's like you made it to the NHL and now you want to volunteer to be the referee," right? So, but that wasn't the way that I saw it. And so my interest, or I don't want to say my style, is kind of quietly working in the background. Someone recently asked me what I was most proud of in terms of the time that I spent in Ottawa as the Member of Parliament. And I thought about it and I said, for our area, and I said, I, working with some others, got about $200 million to be spent on the Trent Severn Waterway in Central Ontario. And that would not have happened if there hadn't been a concerted effort to do it. And the way that we did it, the waterway runs through 4 ridings. Peterborough is one, Northumberland, Peterborough, Haliburton, this area basically, and then Simcoe North. So the idea I had was I created something called the Trent Severn Caucus. I just made it up, right? And there were 4 MPs, but there were also 4 provincial members in those same ridings. And it was that was back in 2006, 2007, 2008, the economic crisis. Remember, there was a lot of money for infrastructure around. And Jeff Leal was the provincial member in Peterborough at that time. So I met with Jeff and I said, let's create this Trent Severn Caucus for the 4 federal and the 4 provincial members. And we'll co-chair it. So we had one provincial Liberal, because that was at the time of Dalton McGuinty's government, so they were in power. And I was in Ottawa, and the Conservative Party was in power in Ottawa, so we co-chaired it. And when the government was handing out money, and they were handing out money in 2008 and 2009 for different things, we did 2 things. A, we went after money together because the federal minister told me, across Ontario, we're going to spend a lot of money. There's going to be arguments about where the money gets spent. But he said, if you have a Liberal counterpart provincially, if you and he, because it was Rick Johnson at that time was our provincial member, I was told, if you and Rick come up with a list that the 2 of you agree on, we'll just approve it, because we have so many other fires to put out. So Rick and I talked about it at our riding level, and Jeff Leal and I worked together at our Trent Severn Caucus. And quite frankly, what we got them to agree to do was to do a structural assessment. Our plan was to get them to do a structural assessment of all the pieces, all the dams through the whole system. And what we knew was if they found a problem, they'd have to fix it. If we just went and said, we think there's a problem here and it's going to cost $20 million to fix, we couldn't have got the money. But if we said, can we have $1 million to hire a structural engineer to go around and look at all the dams to make sure they're all okay. It's very reasonable. And when the structural engineer says, this dam up on Kinesis Lake, if it fails, it's going to flood this whole area, they couldn't not do it, right? And so they did. So I think Maryam's point when she started was that there's different ways to do it, right? And I think there are different ways to do it. And so if you know the way that you get things done, I think there's room in public life for different approaches. I think there are different ways to get things done. Sometimes it's kind of inherently combative. Other times it's cooperative. I told a story to somebody when I came in here tonight. I said when I was in Ottawa, I'd been there about 6 or 7 years, and I went in the back door, and one of the security guards stopped me. And he said, "I'm sorry, only members are allowed to come in here." And I said, "Well, I am a member." So he was a bit embarrassed, and he goes, because he was supposed to recognize the members. He said, "Well, you must be one of the new members." And I said, "No, actually, I've been here for 5 or 6 years." So he said, "I don't know why I don't recognize you." And I said, "Well, that's easy." I said, "I've never said or done anything ridiculous since I got here, right?" So he laughed. I said, "I'll tell you what, though." I said, "I'll make you a bet that I could lead the news at 6 o'clock tonight if I tried. I could get on the news tonight at 6 o'clock, and it wouldn't be by doing something really brilliant. It would be by saying or doing something kind of crazy, right? That's how you get on the news." So I say that not to pat myself on the back, but I say that to say that sometimes things happen in response to public pressure, but sometimes things also happen because in the background, somehow churning away, there's someone that's made a case or pushed something along that, I don't want to say makes sense, but that just somehow, if you understand the decision-making process, sometimes you kind of try to set it up in such a way that the dominoes kind of fall in the right pattern. So whatever your style is, you can be successful. There's no single way to do public life. And if you're committed to it, and if you're passionate, and if you believe in what you're trying to get done, there are many different roads to success.
Wow, 2 great messages for that question. Thank you so much for that. And it's inspiring to hear the successes through different approaches, in this. And I'm hoping that people are kind of seeing little windows of themselves in what you're saying. I'm going to take the time with one more question, and then we'll open it up to the floor. I'm curious, what's a day in the life? What's the actual job like? What is it like on a day-to-day basis? And maybe some things that you would want to highlight for the folks who've joined us tonight, and maybe some things that it's not that you've heard, sort of the myth busters we can try maybe.
Thanks. Well, it's been so long since I was in public life that the last political event I went to, I had to wear a tie. But I am pleased to say that making a fashion statement with ties has been replaced with socks. So when I left Ottawa, I had the ceremonial burning of the suits and ties, right? That I never wanted to put a tie on again. And I have one suit now, it's black. I jokingly call it my funeral suit, works vertically or horizontally. And I have enjoyed kind of my post-suit and tie wearing time. But when I think back, what's a typical day? Here's how I would describe it. When you're a member of parliament, you basically have 2 jobs, 2 whole jobs. The one job is in Ottawa, and you're a legislator, or if Maryam, she was a minister, which actually you had 3 jobs, right? There was another layer of work on top of that. That's a full-time job, and that's long days. That's things on the weekend. That's showing up in Winnipeg at some convention to sit on a panel on Saturday afternoon. It's that whole world in Ottawa. And then the second job is back in your riding. And again, I think whether it's an urban riding or a small city riding like Peterborough, so urban like downtown Toronto, small city like Peterborough, or rural like here, right? And they're very different. I was at a meeting once in Ottawa, a bunch of MPs sitting around, and somebody just said to me, different parties, they said, Barry, how big is your riding? And I thought about it and I said, my riding has 12 legions and 14 Santa Claus parades. That's how big my riding is. And the other rural members laughed, because you could be a block member from Quebec or an NDP from Saskatchewan. You knew what I was talking about. Somebody from Scarborough didn't have a clue what I was talking about, because they'd never been to a Santa Claus parade. And they'd never been to, on Remembrance Day to them was a day off. It wasn't a marathon to run from legion to legion to legion to legion, trying to get to the different places. So it's two full jobs, right? That you're trying to balance those two things. And when you're in Ottawa, if you think that the amount of time that you have is 100%, if you roll up all the requests for your time, it's like 700%. It's not 120 or 140. It's kind of overwhelming. And I guess I had a bit of an advantage because I had worked around politics and I had been around a lot of MPs and MPPs before, and I had seen this happen the wrong way, which is that they burned out. Divorce rate's very high, physically burned out, trying to do kind of too much or say yes to everything. It's very difficult. So that's the one half of the life. The other half of the life, back in the riding, I have been in this room many times, okay? Santa Claus comes here before Christmas and gives out presents right after the parade. And this is always the last parade. So it was always the one I enjoyed the most, because it was the last parade, right? So, so an incredible variety from those two ends. I appreciated being in a rural riding, even though I would argue it's much more work than an urban riding. I didn't have the long distance. Like if you're an MP from the Yukon or even from Kenora or from somewhere in Moncton, where they don't even have direct flights to Ottawa. So the fact that I could hop in my car and be home in 3 or 4 hours, I was envied by many of my colleagues. So it is a lot of work. The opportunities are unbelievable. Like in our lives now, over the course of the year, we have 3 or 4 extraordinary opportunities to go somewhere, do something or whatever. When you're an MP or an MPP, they roll constantly, right? They just roll constantly. And I think that municipal politics, the same, like you get invited to a lot of Legion dinners, right? Like that's kind of part of the job, and that's where you talk to people and that's where you interact. So my first comment would be, it can be an overwhelming amount of work, kind of the good kind of work. About 3 years after I was elected, I went to one of Ursula's cousins got married, and it was an Italian wedding meal, right? The food comes out. And I had noticed after a few months in Ottawa, all my shirts were getting tighter and all my pants were getting tighter. And her one cousin said to me, says, "How often do you see a meal like this?" And I said, "Well, like 2 or 3 times a week." I said, So it's an enormous amount of opportunity. And my last point is, I think one of the great things at any level of politics, you have to kind of do all the stuff you're supposed to do and the things you're expected to do, but you also can pick something that you're interested in. You can pick 1 or 2 things that have whatever interest to you, your like pet project. We all have little pet projects. You just have so much more opportunity to push kind of the ball down the field if you are in public office. And whether you're a councillor or a mayor or an MPP or an MP or whatever, like all in different ways, you have the opportunity to do something that you can look back after the fact and say, hey, maybe I didn't do that all by myself, but I think sometimes you can see stuff, say that probably wouldn't have happened if I hadn't kind of played my part in terms of making it happen. So that's the enormous satisfaction that's also available that kind of helps you deal with all the hours that you put in.
I wish I talked to you before I ran, because I had a very different experience. I was one of those people who got burnt out. I was one of those people who did too much, and I was one of those people who didn't quite understand that the best you can do is move something along forward. I ran because I was restless and impatient, and like, this is common sense. Like, yes, every community deserves clean drinking water from their taps. Like, of course. But the process of getting there was so frustrating, and getting the solutions that like I took it to heart. And I wish, you had just been there kind of whispering in my ear back then, because I probably would not have made the choices and had the same lifestyle that I did. So I didn't do it the right way. I'll start with that. But maybe I'll talk about, the stuff you have to do, the fun stuff and the not fun stuff. Okay? So typical day. And PS, like I served both before the pandemic and during the pandemic. And the pandemic changed everything. But let's talk about before the pandemic. So before the pandemic, the day starts around 6:30, 7 o'clock. If you're a woman, you have more than one suit. And P.S., I have refused to wear outfits that require pantyhose since the pandemic. And so that's my liberation from that lifestyle. Sorry, guys, but the women know what I'm talking about. Pantyhose is like the long socks that, whatever. Anyway, so the day starts, giggles, that's good. 6:30, 7 o'clock, you're up, you're doing your hair, you're doing your makeup, and like you're on the phone. Someone's briefing you on the top headlines and the issues and anything that's changed since you went to bed around 3 a.m. for me. You make it, and usually the first thing is a meeting. Either it's a cabinet meeting, or it's a caucus meeting, or you're meeting with your team. I had 3 different departments that reported to me. So I had many portfolios at one point, which was not a good idea in hindsight. So I was responsible for high-speed internet and women and gender equality. And I had responsibility for some infrastructure funds for rural communities. So I had 3 different deputy ministers and chief of staff and different minnows and different mandates. So checking in with each of them was a big part of the day. If you have house duty, you're in the house from a certain hour until a certain hour, because you need to have the equivalent of quorum in there in case there's a vote as well. And it's different for a majority government or a minority government. Lunchtime is usually meetings. Caucuses can happen around that time. Caucus is when MPs from the same party come together around certain issues. So Women's Caucus, for example, which is a very powerful force within the Liberal Party, would meet at lunchtime on Wednesdays. Wednesdays are also National Caucus Day. So 10 a.m. you meet as a whole team, and like individual MPs have a lot of power. And where do individual MPs get their power? They get it from their community, from you. So if you send the same email, 12 different people make the same phone call about the same issue in a thoughtful way, that flags to the MP that this is an issue I got to run up to the flagpole. Now imagine you're in a room with 184 different MPs, and the PM is sitting over there, and each MP has a few minutes at the mic to say what they need to say. Prime Minister, in my riding this past few weeks, we've been getting calls about this issue nonstop. So let's say it's high-speed internet. And Prime Minister, we need to do something about this, and we need to do it quickly, right? So now imagine you're the PM, and one after another in a coordinated way, 30 of your MPs from your rural caucus are at the mic saying the same thing, okay? Because that does happen, and it did happen. Then it becomes an issue for the Prime Minister's office and the minister. And so then they take that up and they do something about it. And when it goes to the minister's office, now the file that I may have been working on pre-whatever this mobilization effort was suddenly becomes urgent and important. So then you bring in your deputy minister and your chief of staff and you talk about, okay, well, this is the new order, like urgency here, we're getting pressure. And then they bring you and then there's briefings, right? Okay, minister, if you're lucky. Okay, minister, we did what you asked us to do. Here it is. And you go through like lots of reading. There's a lot of reading in the job. You read the thing. Is this the right proposal? Have you taken into consideration all the things? Now we got to prep to take it to cabinet. You take it to cabinet and you have a few minutes to present. You make your case, you answer questions, whatever comes out of that. Then you go back to your team and say, this is where we got to tweak it, but we got approval. Then it goes to finance. And the finance says, that's nice. You got cabinet approval, but like, we'll let you know if you're spending the money the way that you should be. So then you go through that whole process with them. And then it goes to Treasury Board, where they, once again, the checks and balances that we need in our democratic processes. So then when you get the thing now, okay, we've got a communication strategy, we got to launch, and we're going to launch the Universal Broadband Fund. And then, oh, there's a pandemic. Literally like 2 days before the pandemic called, we were ready to roll out this thing. And the pandemic, of course, changed everything, because then it added urgency to certain things, and certain things had to move back to the back burner. And, you know, the fun part is getting shit done, having the power to get things done. The best part of politics, the best are the people who help get you elected. And the people who stay with you through the ups and downs. The people are the best part of politics. It's why I'd recommend it for anybody. Even if you're not going to win, it's worth it, because it brings into your orbit the most lovely humans you will ever meet in your life, and they are your people, and they will be there. The not so fun part is the political violence. It's being afraid to leave your house because people are mad. It's seeing really shitty billboards with awful things about you. It's having your mom or your 9-year-old niece read really awful comments or untruths about you on the internet. It's feeling horrible because the people who begged you to run are making it the most difficult for you. It's when you're sticking your neck out for a group of people, and that group of people is making it hardest for you to do your job. And then it's also like having to say no to really good ideas, because everybody you meet with has a really good idea, but you can't say yes to everything. So that's part of the not fun part.
Thank you both for that window into what it's really like. We do have some time to take some questions from the audience. I don't think we have a mic set up, do we? No. So if you want to, I can just call on you and I'll repeat the question so everyone can hear it. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to direct to either Barry or Maryam? Yes.
I've been around a long time, and there's been an awful lot of elections that I've voted in. I have never yet voted for somebody that won, which means I'm a radical, crazy nut, or whatever. But I've heard community ask for election reform. What would it take?
That's a great question. I'm guessing that's for me.
Anybody. If you can come up with an answer, I would love to hear it.
What's your name?
Randy.
Randy?
Yeah.
So the question, what would it take to make electoral reform happen?
About a week after I got elected to be member of parliament, the PM asked me to be his minister for democratic institutions. And I was so excited because I was given the opportunity to protect and strengthen the health of our democracy at a time when Mr. Trump was thinking about running. And so I thought everybody wanted change. I really did. I thought everybody wanted to improve the system. And one of the reasons why I wish you and I had spoken is because somebody like you would have told me not everybody's going to want change. Even the people who are going to benefit from the change are not going to help you or collaborate with you because they want you to fail, because they want your party or you to look bad. So what will it take for electoral reform? I went to every province and every territory. I went to rural communities and I went to urban communities, and I went to Indigenous communities and I went to non-Indigenous communities. We held, with my parliamentary secretary and I, over 80 town halls in communities, in rooms like this, where we shared, we gave a quick briefing of here are the options, here are the principles that we want to maintain. And then people got into small groups and talked about what principles. And then out of that, we said, okay, what system? What would it take? in not a single town hall could the room agree on which system. Even those who were proponents of, say, proportional representation couldn't agree which form of proportional representation. There were those who just screamed about wanting a referendum. And we knew, as the biggest advocates for reform say, a referendum is inevitably going to fail because previous referenda in Canada have failed on this issue. And we were warned by them not to entertain a referendum on the topic because it will close the door forever on the topic. Oh, we asked the people, they said no. Well, not enough people engaged. And, our focus is to increase engagement. So what you're doing in this community around informing yourselves about the process and the outcomes you want to see, that's a big part of what it will take. Another piece is, if I knew then what I know now, I'll be very frank with you, I would have recommended to the PM, let's go with a ranked ballot. Every political party chooses their leaders through a ranked ballot. If it's good enough for them, it's good enough for Canadians. If I had known then what I know now, I would have also at the same time invested significantly in civics organizations in the country over 2 election cycles so that they could continue to strengthen democracy at the local level, because that's where democracy grows and dies, is at the local level. What it will take is a political party wanting to go through that process again of there was no win for, who's going to benefit from it. So there's got to be a political win for a party to even engage in that process. We have to decide what system we want before we go out there and consult about it. That's something we didn't do. We said, what do you think, Canada? And there was no consensus. And then the other thing it will take is for the parties who want the change to actually come together and get it done for the sake of our future. Because the worst, one of the worst wake-up calls for me in that time, in that first year, I'm 30 years old. I'm a cabinet minister on a hot potato of a file on a thing nobody can agree on, and I'm up on my feet 13 times in question period. You know how awful that is when they're all yelling at you? You better have a strong why. Those political parties who want the change need to work together on it, because the most painful wake-up for me, the first painful wake-up for me, was the NDP, who I thought was going to work with us, in the end didn't want to work with us. And then things spiraled. And then we said, no referendum, we're just going to walk away from this. We will take the political hit, because if we have a referendum, which will kind of say, oh, people didn't want it, then we close the door to reform in the future. So it's still on the table. But those of us who really, really want it, let's decide amongst ourselves, come to consensus amongst ourselves on what we want the new system to be before we ask the people who probably prefer the status quo to give us a change. Does that help?
Electoral reform is a big topic, and I told you I kind of have an academic background kind of dealing with institutions and how elections work, and in kind of decision-making theory. I think there's 2 questions. The first question kind of is, what do you think the system should be, right? That if you're engaged, different people would have an opinion of what they, the old, if someone died and made you king, what would you do? Like that kind of logic. What do you actually think would be a good system for the country? The second question is, given that so many people are dissatisfied with what we have, why does it seem to be impossible to make a change? And I think the key there is there are many options. So if there's 10 ways to do something and we're doing it one of the 10 ways, there might be lots of people that think we should do it one of the other 9 ways. But in order to kind of, I don't want to say defeat, but to get enough support, if they're all split up, then the status quo stays in effect. This is true with electoral reform. I would argue in Canada, this is true with the Indian Act and the Senate and other things. Kind of everybody agrees that the Senate should be changed, but there's 15 different ideas of how to do it, and they can never come together, so just the old one stays there, right? And so my advice to people that are interested in electoral reform would be that would be some kind of incremental change. If you're in business, you know the difference between incremental budgeting versus kind of zero-based budgeting, right? Zero-based budget means if you could just, let's not fix your house, imagine it burns down and we build a new house. What is that going to look like? But in the real world, it's usually renovating an old house as opposed to building a new house. So the ranked ballot would be a relatively easy thing to implement, right? And as Maryam says, that's how the parties pick their leaders. If you could get the people who want reform to agree that that's the one thing to kind of put up against the status quo, it might work. But I'm full of cliches tonight, but it is kind of like herding cats, right? Like it's so hard to get the people who want change to agree to what change they want. And in the absence of that, it all just kind of falls apart and we're left with what was there before. I'm not going to defend the status quo, but what I would say is that every electoral system has its strengths and weaknesses. None are perfect. And an electoral system really needs to do two things. Number one, it needs to represent the will of the people. If in a democracy, the electoral system should reflect the wishes of what people want. But on the other hand, it also needs to work, meaning it needs to be able to produce decisions. So if you, for example, have an electoral system where at the end of the day you have 17 parties in parliament, then it's really hard to make decisions. Belgium, Italy, Israel, countries that have different systems, they spend a lot of time just trying to cobble together coalitions to get things done. Sometimes a big party that doesn't have majority has to get the support of a little party. This is what's happening in Israel, I think. And then you're kind of the big party in the middle is kind of a captive of the little party on the fringe that says, if for us to support you, you have to do these three things for us. So I don't think the current system that we have is horrible. I think it works. It's not far from perfect, and I think it could be improved. But I think that if you look at the world in the last 100 years, most people would point to Canada as an example of a successful democracy. So we're not going to perfect it. I think we can improve it, and I think the path to that is a single proposal that's relatively simple and straightforward, as opposed to kind of a wide open, let's look at 12 options, because it's hard to find a consensus in that case.
Thank you very much. We are coming close to the end of our time, and I have a few final remarks, but are there any other questions? We could probably do one more question. Yes, Mike?
What would you say is the biggest difference you feel you made during your time in politics?
Say that again.
The biggest difference you made.
So the biggest difference you made during your time in politics, and I am going to ask you to be succinct with this one because we are coming up to, well, the baseball game has started, so.
Well, I mentioned the one thing in terms of a project would be the Trent Severn waterway in this area. And obviously it didn't do that alone. But every time I drive down Highway 35 past the dam there, I think that I feel good that I was a part of that. I also think that on another level, I'm a turn down the temperature kind of a guy. I'm not a polarizing figure. So I think my kind of cooperative approach that I got along with most people can work. And I think that, if anyone saw that and thought, I can be successful in this business without, kind of being a firebrand, that, that can work too. I think that has value.
Yeah, I don't recommend that. Thanks, Mike, for your question. I think the biggest thing is I survived. And I'm still encouraging people to run and helping them figure out how it's going to work for them so that they don't repeat the same mistakes that I did, so that they have room to make their own. When I got elected, not only was I the first woman from my riding to represent them in Ottawa, I became the first Muslim around the cabinet table, the first Afghan Canadian in Parliament. And so people are like, yay, shattered glass ceilings. It's all easy from here on. But like, shattering a ceiling hurts. It comes with cuts and bruises and scars, and there's people, hopefully if you're lucky, cleaning up the shards. So on a personal level, it's that. And that's testament to Canadian democracy and the community that I belong to, that I am still hopeful and excited about politics and inspired by initiatives like this. In terms of projects that I supported, I don't know if there was an MP in my community who brought more investments into the riding than me, and that was me giving back to my community so much they gave me. During the pandemic, process-wise, bringing all the different leaders at the municipal level, health officials, the college, the university, economic development folks together weekly for a call so that we wouldn't be so lonely on Zoom, so that we wouldn't be so lonely, but also to coordinate our efforts. That's something that I think made a difference. When I was a women's minister, we established the first full department for women and gender equality in Canada. When I was there, we provided the largest investments to women's organizations in Canada and around the world, making us the #1 investor in those efforts. The Universal Broadband Fund was a program I helped lead in government, and that was the single largest investment in rural high-speed internet in Canada's history. So those are all really, and like in my community, I love being like, oh, look, the causeway is all good now. Oh, the canoe museum's up. The Trent Severn Waterway, look at it go. Like, being able to, the shelters for people waiting at the buses, the new buses we got, the high-speed train is chugging along and not a dead project. These are all things I'm really proud of. But honestly, Mike, surviving political violence and making the friends that I did, surviving political violence and still stepping up to the plate day after day, I have to give credit to Lauren Hunter for this, because there were so many days when I was ready to quit, where I was like, what am I doing? People liked me. I had money. Like, people smiled at me. Now they're yelling at me. But somebody like Lauren Hunter says, every day that you show up, you are winning and things are gonna get better, right? That's what I'm proud of, is I was fortunate enough to have people like her in my corner, even in those moments.
We'll have to pass that on to Lauren. I know she was disappointed not to be able to be here tonight. So thank you both so much for taking the time to spend with us and share your insights in such a frank and honest way. It's been really interesting and very valuable. On behalf of the steering committee and everyone here, thank you so much. Yeah. So as I indicated at the beginning of tonight's session, this is the second of a series of 4, and the final 2 are yet to be scheduled for the spring of 2026. And the committee will be working hard over the next couple of months to plan those out. So please stay tuned for details. And again, if you want to get on the email list, they'll be right in your inbox, hot off the press. We are also dreaming up other ways to continue the conversation over the winter. And so I have the second last Mentimeter question here for you. If you want to pick out your phones and check the score, somebody told me it was 2-0 for the Jays. 2-0, bottom of the first. So here are a couple of some ideas that the committee has in terms of ways to get people talking and interacting and thinking about democracy outside of this series. So we're interested in hearing what you're interested in. So if you can just take a minute and participate in that poll.
Can tick as many as they want?
Yes, you can tick as many as you want. Thanks, Kara. All right, great. Well, that gives a bit of a sense of interest. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on that one. Also, one last question just to see who's in the room. You can just indicate where you traveled from tonight. And it's always instructive to see where people are drawing from. All right, that's great. We'll allow for big thumbs if you are in Highlands East, but you hit Dysart by accident. So just to wrap up tonight, I would really like to thank the steering committee for this project, for making the speaker series come together. It's a really important time for us to encourage participation in democracy, and this is a wonderful effort by a really passionate group of people. So thank you so much for coming this evening, and thank you to the committee for all your hard work in the background. Safe travels.